this be the Loch Ness monster? This footage was taken at the weekend by an amateur scientist who happened to spot a fast-moving creature swimming across the world-famous Loch. Gordon Holmes from Yorkshire had been undertaking some amateur scientific tests on the Loch, recording sounds from the deep with special hydrophonic equipment. But nothing prepared him for the prospect of actually setting eyes on what could be the elusive Nessie, an event he luckily captured on film.
I suspect that
It has the appearance of an animal of some sort in Loch Ness. The issue, of course, is how big is it and what is it? And I'm afraid that is going to have to await some further assessment. There are, of course, a number of creatures in Loch Ness that can give rise to wakes, and they would include otters, seals, and waterbirds.
Welcome to the Lair of Darkness, my friends. I am your host, the Dark Lord. Today, I'm going to conclude my kick-ass Nessie discussion. So, what exactly is a good way to convince you that there is some kind of monster living in the foggy waters of Loch Ness Lake without using photos or videos in an attempt to prove it? Well, it goes like this. Not every lake in the entire world has been claimed to harbor a creature or monster of some sort, like I have explained before. Well, let's say Loch Ness, for example. There have only been 2 to 3 people who have made contact with the monster on land. However, their descriptions of what they have claimed to have seen were very fucking similar and detailed to what others have seen. And there would be no reason to describe a creature so specifically compared to a goddamn plesiosaur unless they really seen it. Why would some people claim to have seen a fucking monster in Loch Ness if they hadn't? And if they didn't make it up, why would they describe it as a specific fucking dinosaur? Well, let's say this. All 5 of the Great Lakes, Superior, Michigan, Huron, Erie, and Ontario are far bigger than Loch Ness, yet there has never been any eyewitness or claim of any sighting of anything you would call monstrous in any of them except Lake Erie. Eyewitnesses starting in Sandusky, Ohio, have claimed to have seeing a creature significantly resembling a sturgeon, said to be from 30 to 60 feet long, and being dark to copper-like in color. Now, from what I have been able to discover, all eyewitness reports of this so-called Bessie, South Bay Bessie, or the Lake Erie monster creature have all described this entity as being significantly serpent-like and look extremely comparable to a sturgeon. So I am not even close to being convinced that what these eyewitnesses have claimed to have seen is in fact a monster. Also, when it comes to evidence supporting its existence, there are absolutely no photographs or videos to support its existence. However, I do believe that what these people could have claimed to have seen is a big-ass sturgeon, seeing as I know for a solid fact that big-ass sturgeons do in fact exist. So that is definitely possible. In a previous episode of Nessie, that Arthur Grant's encounter with the monster of Loch Ness revealed that the creature itself was actually a cross between a seal and a plesiosaur. Grant's defining of the monster as a plesiosaur was the first indication that Nessie was a prehistoric survivor from the land before time. However, there was another story about a possible prehistoric creature living in the loch revealed back in 1880 from a man named Duncan MacDonald. In 1880, Duncan MacDonald, a diver working in the depths of Loch Ness on a sunken ship, had a terrifying underwater experience with something monstrous living in Loch Ness. According to MacDonald, while working one day, when diving into the dark shadows of the loch, when he sent up a signal to be pulled out of the water immediately. When MacDonald came splashing out of the water, His face was as white as a skull, and he refused to speak for days. Finally, he revealed his encounter. After diving into the loch, Duncan sighted a massive creature lurking around the ruins of the sunken ship. He described it as looking like a big frog. After this experience, Duncan was too terrified to ever go diving into the loch. Ever again. Now, most artists' descriptions of Nessie are mostly compared to a plesiosaur, such as these two. Even the ones that proven to be hoaxes, such as these two. But also understand this, there have been many fish captured in rainforests around the world that most people had thought went extinct millions of years ago, such as this one, the Latimeria chalomne, or however that's pronounced, until this one was captured in Africa in 1969. There have also been numerous attempts to find bones and or carcasses of the monster using sonar equipment in the 1970s, like this one, and, well, this one. And they were capable of recovering a rotting corpse of a plesiosaur. However, it was not found in Loch Ness, but the sea. And they were only able to catch another glimpse of the supposed monster on sonar. Now, as I recall in part 1 of this discussion, I wondered why they decided to call it a monster rather than a creature because it was not infamous. Well, there apparently is a reason for that. You see, the monster itself is bigger than what was previously thought. So they decided to go with monster because of its, well, monstrous fucking size. And I agree with that because monster is more punchy and makes more sense than just creature. Now, the view of the loch from the surface, let's say if you were looking down on the surface on Google Maps, is significantly limited to only about 5 feet. Afterwards, it is pure darkness, meaning you will not be able to see hardly, well, anything, unless it was probably coming out of the water. The fish and other creatures lurking near the surface could swim so near the surface of the loch and never even be seen. The water is so dark that even divers who work on or around Loch Ness describe the water as sometimes being too dark and scary to even go swimming inside of, out of too much fear that builds up inside of them. I, the Dark Lord myself, must admit that I myself have had nightmares about swimming in Loch Ness, mainly because of the possibility of being attacked by Nessie, or even seeing Nessie break the surface of the water. And that's what I actually mean when I say that Nessie holds second place of being the second scariest cryptid of all time behind only the Mothman. The atmosphere and wilderness or so-called mood changes surrounding Loch Ness is significantly unpredictable, making the loch even more eerie, sinister, and especially mysterious. Also, the temperature setting of Loch Ness is always, even during the summertime, freezing, as going below 150 feet, the water temperature drops to 42 degrees Fahrenheit and continues to drop after that. Now, many skeptics claim this is another reason that the Loch Ness Monster does not exist, as Nessie, who is, like I have said before, usually claimed as looking like a plesiosaur, would not only be unable to survive in such freezing waters due to its cold-blooded nature, but also would be unable to consume the food it would require to sustain its body in such harsh environments. However, I don't find that to be entirely true, seeing as Loch Ness is home to some very delicious fish, such as Atlantic salmon, sea trout, and brown trout, which are all from the salmon family, among others. These fish can live in some very cold waters, going from 70 degrees all the way down to 60 to 55 degrees, and even 40 degrees at some points. And I also must point out that these fish require very cold waters to thrive in due to the fact that it contains much more oxygen that these fish need for substantial growth. Another thing you must consider is that these fish migrate from the sea to lakes in order for healthy breeding grounds to take place. These fish would be excellent food and diet choices for the Loch Ness Monster or monsters to be able to survive in cold environments, in such cold environments of the loch. Now, of course, as there was with Bigfoot, there are many books, TV shows, and movies about the Loch Ness Monster, going from 1977's The Crater Lake Monster all the way to 2008's Loch Ness Terror. Now, in addition to those movies, there is also 1996's Loch Ness, 2002's Beneath Loch Ness, 2004's Incident at Loch Ness, my goddamn all-time fucking favorites, 2007's The Water Horse Legend of the Deep, 2008's The Secret of Loch Ness, Loch Ness Terror, as I have said before, and 2017's Nessie and Me. Nessie has also made cameo appearances in 1970's The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes and 1992's Freddy the Frog. Now, one of the most prominent TV shows that investigates the Loch Ness Monster would be the first episode of Season 3 of Monster Quest, which aired on the History Channel. Now, as I have said in previous episodes, Monster Quest heavily dramatizes situations with these so-called monsters, seeing as they never seem to uncover nothing but evidence and things we've already seen and recovered, and they never seem to recover anything except for things we already know about. Of course, there are many books on the legend of the Loch subject that we are already talking about, and that they all seem to say the same thing. Not only is there a monster in Loch Ness, but they all mostly describe it as a dinosaur known as the plesiosaur. If most books such as Cryptozoology A to Z say that there is a plesiosaur in Loch Ness, a book called Seattle's Loch Ness say that there is a plesiosaur in Loch Ness. A book called The Monster of Loch Ness claims that what people saw was a plesiosaur in or even around Loch Ness. Obviously, there is something much more sinister than just a sturgeon living in Loch Ness. And now, I'm finally going to admit this to you, my friends. Until the May 2007 Loch Ness footage was released, I had no idea that the Loch Ness Monster was even a real legend. I thought it was just another Scooby-Doo movie, believe it or not. But let me tell you this. When I found out that the Loch Ness Monster was in fact a real legend, due to the fact that I was raised open-minded, I became an instant believer in Nessie. And because I was raised to have an open mind, I believe that there is definitely a possibility that there are things out there that we never thought were out there. Another thing I will tell you, my friends, is that Loch Ness Lake is definitely on my bucket list of places to go before I, bite the dust. I will go on a boat cruise around the loch, hoping to glimpse at any sign of suspicious activity, but odds are I won't see shit. But that doesn't mean the monster is not out there, and I will have a great time no matter what happens. Now, we are left to wonder, is the Loch Ness Monster just a figment of our imaginations? Is it just a Scooby-Doo movie? Or does it in fact live in the darkest shadows of Loch Ness Lake to this very day? Join me next time, my friends, when I begin my discussion surrounding the most terrifying cryptid of all time, the Mothman. Ciao, bitches.